All right, hi everybody. This is Descry Gaming. I'm here to bring a live stream, and this one's kind of special. This one is going to cover a game that I'm recently playing a lot of is Dragonfront Rising. Now, this was originally a game that was uh, released quite a bit ago, like 4 years ago, I think. But on the original Oculus Rift, but it kind of phased out and they brought it back again. But I am gonna go through the entire roster of cards, or at least try live. And yeah, you could join on Discord, on the Discord Dragonfront, if you want to jump into the voice pod, ask me questions. Totally willing to go there with you guys. But anyway, it's going to be a live stream. We're going to go through the cards. I'll talk about the game. I'll explain my thought process of rating the cards. And just to give you some background, so I used to play the game back in the day quite a bit. So if you're wondering, like, how do I know all this information? Well, I used to play the game quite a bit back in the day. So I kind of have all that knowledge and my opinion, obviously. But yeah, we're gonna like jump into this, and I'm gonna kind of pause it and then get my rating, explain, if I think this card is a good card or if it's a trap card. Don't spend your scrap. So in Dragonfront, you can buy boosters, and it's like a random. You might get a really good card. You might just get some commons. But you can also gain a thing called scrap, which is a way for you to purchase the exact card you want. But some cards are worth more scrap because they're rare or unique. But yeah, so this will be a good guide for maybe new players that aren't sure where to spend their scrap. I'll definitely kind of give you my 2 cents on that. But yeah, we have a lot to cover. There's a lot of cards. I am actually going to go through the neutrals first. So the neutral cards can be used by any faction. And it's broken up by spell, fort, and units. So we're going to tackle that first. And then we're going to go into champions. And then we're going to go into 7 damage or whatever. But more importantly, you can use this. Say you play an air unit and it gets to your opponent's stronghold line. Now, the thing is, with air units, they can actually hit the stronghold over land units. So if your opponent doesn't play another flying unit, you can just keep hitting their stronghold. But so if you play a Griffin, the Griffin gets +2 more power when he attacks a stronghold. So he becomes a 6 power. So say you get a Griffin at your enemy's stronghold, and he plays something big to deal with your Griffin, you could then stun that unit. And now that unit is in the respawn row and doing nothing. It's like stun for a whole turn. So you could then get another attack on the stronghold. So it's good in, like, if you run a lot of strong flyers, this is a great card to run. And there's some, like in Delirium, there's some cards where, especially Delirium, where you need a card to be stunned to either kill it or take control of it. And again, you can utilize Flashbang. But yeah, the cost is wonderful. Like 0 cost, like that is so nice. And this can come in handy. Now, if you're not playing air units or doing shenanigans that I mentioned, then yeah, it's kind of a mediocre card because, it's not really going to help you unless you're doing what I described. But yeah, definitely I would say probably I rate this a 4 out of 5. I see a lot of value in it in a lot of decks. And it's a common, so. So Flourish is a 0 cost, gain 1 mana. So this is kind of like a ramp spell card. It's good if you play super aggro decks and you have a way to draw quite aggressively. Then I could definitely see it in decks like those. But if you're not running a very super aggressive deck, it takes up a deck card space. You have limited 30 cards. So I think that's where the trap could be. Like, I only really see it useful in those super uber rush decks with very aggressive and lots of card draw. Uh, but I'd probably give it a 3 because I think it's limited to like every card in your deck can be very critical. So this is a very niche kind of card. Forefather's Prayer, randomly gain 1 of 4 champion tokens. It's 0 cost. So this is an excellent card if your strategy is to beat your opponent out with a champion. Definitely a great card. It's just a common, which is great. You could forge it pretty easy. But yeah, so if you're a person that likes to get their champion out quite quickly to make their strategy work, this is not a bad card, although I'm still a super fan of Sigil Sacrifice because it has way more utility that need to get card draw. Or if, say, you run the slime, it respawns into another slime but has no mana fragments. There's a lot of there's some units that this is great to just play on. But what makes Repurpose and Sigil such good utility spell cards is they cost 0, and not only can you maybe draw cards or get more tokens or get the mana fragments back, but it allows you to remove a unit that might be ahead of your unit. So you could, like, a lot of times you might have a kind of a weak power unit behind a very strong unit. So this is a way for you to get rid of that front unit and then do damage to the enemy stronghold. So I'm almost like, I wouldn't say 100%, but I'm very adamant about at least running one of these, either Repurpose or Sigil, at least one in every deck, unless your deck is super unique. But for the most part, I just think in lots of games, a Repurpose or a Sigil could change the game dramatically, or surprise your opponent. And you always end up using one of these. Another example is, like, say you play a unit, a low power unit, and here's a better example. Okay, so you pay a Scale Martyr, which is a cheap unit, but it gives you 3 mana fragments. It's a 0 power, 1 hit point. So it's just meant to die, but give you a whole bunch of mana fragments. Your opponent plays a Soul Void or a Blight type unit. Well, now you're going to lose out on those beautiful 3 mana fragments. But say you play Sigil Sacrifice, not Repurpose because it's going to blight it, but say you Sigil the Scale, you get those 3 mana fragments, and then you play a counter unit to counter whatever, their Soul Void or whatever they're playing, or something that doesn't, So like, there's many ways you can kind of use Repurpose. So I would rate this like 4.5, if not 5 out of 5. Now, like I said, you don't want to go crazy and have tons of sigils, tons of repurposes in your deck, but I do think at least running one of these is great for most decks. So Shifting Worlds, 0 costs, allows you to shift on unoccupied fort. You might say, okay, that's kind of garbage. I guess the thought process, if traps ever became super meta, which they never did in the back in the day when I played Dragonfront, traps were okay. But the problem with traps is, which I'll probably talk more about traps, but you don't get mana fragments from traps. So when traps do their thing, they usually are destroyed and they do something. So that's like the kind of the problem with traps is, unless there's a way you can, there's certain synergies you can get with traps, but for the most part, you play a trap, you're going to get no mana fragments from it. But there's certain situations where traps can be very useful. But again, before your opponent, and getting an early champion out before your opponent can sometimes be enough to just close the game. And then again, you could use this as a utility. Like say you have a unit that has done its activation. Say it killed a blocker or did damage to a stronghold, but you have another powerful unit behind it. You could then sigil the front unit and then hit your opponent again. So it has so many different purposes. Now, I guess there might be some players that think this spell should be higher cost or just taken out of the game because of the things I mentioned, what it can do. But I think I love this card. Is it good? Yeah, it's definitely. I haven't given any card a 5 out of 5. This is a 5 out of 5 card. And what's great about it is a common card. So, even if you are a free-to-play player, you should be able to easily forge these. They're not too expensive. I think it's just 400 each. So, just play the game. You'll collect scrap and you can sigil away. So, so we got Snipe here. 0 cost, does 1 damage. Now, when I played Dragonfront, one of the high meta units was Tempest Artillery, which is like a epic 5 power, 1 health unit with range. This was a great counter to that unit because this costs you 0. And I definitely think, and again, there's Battlefield Surveyors that get played early. You could use Snipe, it costs 0. You're down a card, but like I said, if you have good draw in your deck, it's not so bad. Yeah, this is a great card. Will it go into every single deck? No. I think, though, if the meta shows that people are always running Tempest Artillery, then this is probably an auto-include just to counter that type of unit, which is pretty deadly. Lunatic is usually... Like if you're not going to go Snipe, at least get Lunatic, which that's in the unit section, which we're doing spells first. But yeah, great card. I would say definitely 4 out of 5 type card. I think it's a great card to add. It could come in clutch. More importantly, it's 0 cost. Spoils of War. So Spoils of War, for each ally unit in enemy territory, gain 2 mana. So this is kind of a unique card. If you're going super aggressive, like super aggro, this is a phenomenal card to run in a super aggro deck. Oh, there goes my voice. Yeah, so I like it in that regard. But if you're not going super aggro, units trying to do damage to your enemy stronghold, this is like a trap. Like if you're playing standard Dragonfront, don't run this. But if you're running that particular strategy, definitely a great card. So it's hard to rate this because, like I said, if you're using these, mainly catapults are awesome with this, especially in scales. But there's certain like champions. I'll give you an idea. Like with Delirium, you can put it on Soul Void, and there's a spell card that destroys your Starling and does damage to a stronghold based on the power. So if you had a full row and you put this on, your Soul Void's getting 9 power, and you could launch it indirectly and do 9 damage to the stronghold. There's also a champion that will destroy your allied unit's power and do damage back. So there's and like I said, catapults or range units even. So this is a good spell card that I don't see many Dragonfront players actually use. And I'm surprised because it's quite good, especially in ranged units. I think it's great. It's only 1 cost. It's not extremely expensive either. So I rate this like a 3.5 out of 5. Fury. So granted unit +2/+1 until the end of turn. I think this is more for aggro decks, like super aggro decks that will occasionally get, empty attack on the stronghold quite easily. This is a great card just to keep pushing that damage. But outside of aggro deck, I'm not I mean, it could come in clutch. Like, I'll give you an example. Say you play your Grizzly Mac, which is a 5/5. Your opponent responds with their Grizzly Mac, which is a 5/5. But say they're going to clash. Well, you could play this on your Grizzly Mac. You kill theirs, and then because that +1 health, the turn ends, and because he would be at 6 health, he goes to 1 health, so he kind of survives. But I that's kind of, the only other outside of aggro kind of thing I could see it being used a bit. But yeah, it's not terrible. I'd probably give it a 2. Ice Leech, 1 cost for each unit in the enemy spawn row, gain 1 mana. This is good, especially if you're playing in a very passive way, and if your opponent loves to do early swarms of cheap units to gain mana. Like, there's some decks out there that play a lot of low cost, 0/1 cost stuff, Eclipse and stuff, where they could fill their row maybe fully on round 1 or 2 sometimes. And then you just play this, and you just, you're like, oh, thank you for filling your spawn row up. Yeah. So yeah, it's, but again, it's, if you play someone that's not playing a lot of units quickly in their spawn row. But when you think about it, if they have 4 units in spawn row, this costs 1. You play this, you're netting 3 extra mana. So, but at a cost of losing 1 card. So yeah, I'd probably give this a 2, but 2 out of 5. Granite ally unit respawn 1/1 animated Stygian. Yeah, I could see it. It's worth in probably catapults. But yeah, I'd probably just give this a 2. Choose 1. Heal an ally unit for 2 or heal your stronghold for 2. Costs 1. Yeah, I give it a 2. But the thing about Dragonfront, again, you only have 30 cards. So your spell slots are kind of like very competitive. So, like mediocre cards kind of like that. It's questionable if you're actually going to put it in your deck or not. Oh, this is where I actually hit the wrong button here. All right, so going, to banish. Let me. This is the next card. Move a non-giant enemy unit to a random empty space in your opponent's spawn row. It's an interesting spell card, but like, I don't know. It's weird. You want to okay. So I do have an example of this working in a deck. Because normally it's like, why would you want to send a unit back to the spawn row? They're going to gain mana next turn. It's kind of weird. But there's certain decks like I'll give you an example. I built a mill deck with Delirium with the Jester. The Jester's not out yet, but back in the day, I used this card. What I would do is I would actually push and use Banish, use Forts to basically block, like keep my opponent's spawn roll completely filled. And I would then multiply Rats Rue that draws everyone a card. I would try to make my opponent draw extra cards. And by him not being able to drop units, because I would keep them kind of pushed back into the spawn row, it made his deck full, and then he would start discarding cards. So with that deck I'm describing, I would play my Jester, this champion called the Jester. Her ability would transform cards in your opponent's deck into like a useless 0/2 unit, a Trump Creeper. So I would try to keep the spawn row just like locked, put walls and stuff, and it was so frustrating for my opponent. But yeah, this is a card that is kind of like doing that strategy. Like you just want to block your opponent's spawn. No, no. Go downstairs, David. Go. Yeah, so again, this is super niche. In that regard, I'd say this is like a 2. But like there's always like some cards you can kind of make work, like that are inherently bad, but they can work in some weird type of deck in Dragefront. So that's what I'm trying to get at. But anyways, and that's what I hope with this video does, is that yes, I'm trying to rate cards and all that, but also giving some good ideas. Like, and that's why this game, I think, I hope gets more popular, is because it has, like, if you like card games with a lot of strategic and deck building, this game is great. At first, you might think like, oh, it's not balanced, but a lot of it is just like learning the game, building a good deck that's working with your particular strategy. Cataclysm, destroy 4, gain 3 champion tokens. This costs 2. This is a great fort removal. It's awesome. I would say that almost every deck you make should at least have one kind of fort removal. This is a great one just to put in, because this helps, it destroys a fort and you get some tokens to get your champion out. But yeah, because forts, if you're playing just a standard type Dragonfront game and your opponent plays some key forts down and you have no answer to it, that could literally just destroy you. So this is a great, like, if you're unsure what fort, and this is an uncommon, so this is very easy to, no, I think everybody has access to this card. Yeah. I would say I like poison in this game, but unfortunately, well, here's the thing. Okay. Again, it goes back to, so Silence has a champion and they have forts that can do, I think, extra poison damage. And you could poison a champion. All right. Cause it doesn't say, poison, unit non-champion. So again, this could technically be good in that type of deck. But again, outside that, it's terrible in almost every other deck or faction. So again, this would probably be a 1 out of 5. But like I said, it could still work based on that example I talked. And that's what you're going to notice a lot. Like the ratings, you can't always go by the ratings, but if you're looking for just a general meta type deck, then the ratings are more probably accurate. Like just get, the good cards that kind of work with everything. But yeah.
Creeping Infestation.
Creeping Infestation. I don't want to rewind that, but it went too quick. I missed the pause. But pretty average card. I never really used it in any of my decks. There's a lot of cards. This is going to be a long stream. Fortify. Until your next start of turn, your stronghold is immune to all damage. This is very interesting. I think this card can be extremely good against perhaps combo decks. So what I would say is, with combo decks, usually when they're about to or almost climax into the combo. For instance, Anima needs to get her champion tokens down a bit, or she needs to have enough Scale Martyrs, for the forest unit type that gets 3 mana fragments. What I'm trying to say is they need to develop their play, their spawn row and everything. They need to have enough cards in their hand to kind of pull off a combo. So you can kind of, and sometimes I'll drop, like in my Anima deck, I'll drop a giant, and next turn I'm going for the combo. This is where you could totally screw up a combo deck. Be like, I know you're going to do your combo next round. I'm going to play this, and next round you can't do any damage to my stronghold. Now, why that's really nice is because combo decks want to kill you before you have time to react. That's the whole nature of a combo play. Is I'm going to do this fancy combo, and boom, you're dead. game over, checkmate. So this could be, now it's a little tricky because you have to know when they're going to combo. So again, for new players, I think it's a bad situational. So I'd say average 2 or 3 out of 5.
Nature's bounty.
Draw 2, cost 2. Yeah, I think, again, you have 30 cards to put in. I think this is a trap. I don't think it's to take up one of your slots in your 30-card deck. I think it's pretty bad. You could play Shade Thaumaturge. You got a unit that gives you fragments. It does power. It can defend, fight. Sometimes you can draw more than one card with Shade Thaumaturge. Way better. Just give me an example. So yeah, garbage card. I give this like a 0.5.
20 minutes.
Yep, I'll be there soon.
Overload.
So Overload is interesting. Granted, ally unit start a turn, gain +1 power, deal 1 damage to this unit. This can be played on champions too. And if you have ways to kind of heal and grind it out, like I have one strategy. I use this on Old Man Mountain with Silence. That champion has Swift. Swift means if its power defeats that unit, they take no damage. So they do the damage before the enemy can counterattack. So you play that on this unit, and his power keeps climbing to a point where no unit can trade with him. He'll just delete it. But you have to kind of heal him somehow. But or you play this on a Bloater. So Bloater is a 3 cost, 1 power but 5 health. But when it takes 1 damage, it gains a mana. You can play this on a Bloater, and you're gaining mana, and the Bloater starts becoming quite powerful. So it's kind of funny. So yeah, there's some tricks with this. Definitely don't think it's a garbage spell card. I would probably give this 3.5 out of 5. Pretty cool card.
Redeployment.
Return an ally non-champion unit to your hand. Reduces cost by 2. Yeah. So there's certain units in the game that this is amazing with. You could do a lot of shenanigans with it. Definitely, I would rate this high. What? I'm gonna be down there when it's close to countdown. Yeah, I gotta do the countdown, but it's not quite there. Yeah, so this is a great spell card. It could, like I said, there's certain decks you make, certain units you can take advantage of the synergy really well. I would give this like a 3.5 out of 5. I think it's good. Deal 1 damage and stun 2 costs. Yeah, I don't. The 1 damage, why? If you're stunning it, yeah, the 0 cost flashbang is so much better, because usually it's the stun that you want, not the damage. So I would kind of rate this like bad compared to a better card like flashbang. I'd give this like a 0.5 out of 5, like less than 1.
Ancient knowledge.
So Ancient Knowledge, this is the combo card for most combo decks, or those 1-turn kill decks. Obviously, this has been used greatly in Anima's Champion Anima from Essence. Grand Astronaut can use this too. There's a lot of type of decks can use this, but again, combo. Amazing combo potential. Very hard to counter. That's what makes it such a good card. So yeah, I rate this quite high, but outside of that kind of strategy, it's bad. It's a bad card, right? If you're just playing normal Dragonfront, this is not a card you want to put in. But in a combo deck, amazing. It's like 4 out of 5. I would rank this. But outside of a combo of forts and stuff, this is pretty good. but it's going to destroy the fort. So this is a very like situational one. Like sometimes you don't want to destroy your own fort. There's some forts out there like Silence has a lot of forts that are like 0 cost, don't do anything, or if they are destroyed, the silent player benefits from it. So I could see this probably in a silence deck. It's pretty good, but outside that, it's very niche. So I give this like a 2 out of 5.
Call to master.
Call to Master. I missed the pause there, but it's going to give, based on how many units are on the field, tokens to your champion. So again, this is a good spell card for a strategy to get a champion out. If you're a passive Dragonfront deck, you're just going to, not push out. There's going to be a lot of units on your opponent's side. You're going to fill up. So definitely really good if that's the way you're playing. Having one in your deck works quite nice. So I give this like a 4 out of 5. Cinder Prophecy. For each unit that was destroyed this turn, draw 1. So this can be very, very strong, especially in certain decks where you're doing mass clear or you're, and there's many kind of combos you can do to kill a whole bunch of units on a turn. So this can be pretty powerful. It does cost 3 though, so it's not free. But again, it can give you some mad card draw. But the trap is like new players on kind of normal Dragonfront decks. This probably is a bad deck, bad card to put in, because again, it requires you to have to kill a lot of stuff on a turn. So on an average deck, I'd say this is a bad card to put in, but on a specific... Okay, so yeah, we're gonna rate it probably a 1.5, but on someone knows what they're doing and that could pull that like a mass kill off. This is quite good, but rating it low for normal people. Drain 2, again, this is going to be good for those deck types that are all about blighting and draining, mainly Delirium, but also Eclipse can kind of pull the strategy off too. Yeah, so it's quite good, but outside that archetype, it's a bad card. It's only good in those type of architects. So again, the correct archetype, it's pretty high card. I'd say a 4 or 3.5. Outside that, it's like a 0.5, almost a 0.
Tangling Vines.
All right, so Tingling Vine, this can be really good on high power units, Grizzly Max, Soul Void, Blight units with high power, champions. So this is a really good spell card. I'd say 4 out of 5 on this, but again, it costs a lot. It's kind of like a tricksy spell card to finish your opponent.
Hidden Agents.
Destroy a non-champion enemy unit with a power of 2 or less. Add 1/1 Unbound Shadow to your hand. Yeah, it's, I don't know. Again, I would say a 2 out of 5. I usually don't ever run this card. So we're going to take a break because I'm going to welcome in the new year. So I will be back. All right. So this, I am back. I brought in the New Year's, and we're gonna try to finish up this stream, but it's 2024. Pretty awesome. Okay, let's go back into the stream here. Talking about Hidden Agents. Yeah. So yeah, interesting card. I'm not over the moon with it. I think it's an average card, so 2 out of 5.
Mana feedback.
So mana feedback, I like this one a lot, especially in Survivor archetype decks. This is amazing because it will like ping off, do 1 damage multiple times. So is there any champions that have the Survivor trait? I can't remember, but no, this works really good in certain kind of deck types. What's awesome about it, it only costs 3. So that is really good. And the fact that someone plays like a 7 power unit giant or whatnot, mana feedback for 3. And if you have a lot of Survivor units or just maybe 1 or 2 units out, you get rid of like a really strong unit for just a really ridiculous cost of only 3. And sometimes you can profit off it. So definitely a good card, a really strong card. I would give this a 4 out of 5. I really like this card a lot. Nature's Wrath. Target unit takes 2 damage and is stunned or deal 2 damage to an. And the key tenets of a good Dragonfront deck is like mana and card draw. So, you know, how you're configuring your deck, you could run this to kind of fill one of those things that you need. So again, 3 out of 5. I think it's a pretty good card. Shift to enemy unit. Yeah, that's interesting. It's 3 costs though. That's the thing I don't like. I feel like if this card was maybe 2 costs or 1 cost, even better. But 3 costs just to shift an enemy unit. Now, I understand you could probably shift them into a trap, shift them into a fort, or shift him against a unit type that counters his unit. But I don't know. It's kind of one of those situational cards, and it costs a lot. So probably give it a 1 out of 5. But yeah, I can see maybe some play in certain situations with it, but deal 3 damage to all units in a lane. This one's actually quite good, uncommon. It definitely punishes people that like to stack a lane. But the thing is, if your opponent knows you play carpet bombing, then they're not going to be stacking a lane. So it's the only drawback with it. It's a great spell card. But as soon as your opponent knows you have carpet bombing in your deck, it's going to lose value. So maybe 2 out of 5. So 4 costs, Death Siphon. Now, this one's really interesting because this is going to do 2 things. It's going to remove a unit, whatever unit, but it's also going to do damage to your stronghold. But that is also a benefit in some way because it can help you bring out your champion quicker. And then if you run other things to maybe heal your stronghold, it's not such a bad thing to take damage. Sometimes taking early damage or doing damage to your stronghold could be a strategy in itself to helping you play your champion before the enemy champion. So again, this is a very, I think, good spell card. In new players' decks, probably not so much because you got to be careful, right? But I use it in some of my decks and I like it. But so I'd give it maybe a 3.5 out of 5. It's a good spell card.
Phase land.
Destroy all forts in frontline row and heal your stronghold by 2 for each one destroyed. That's very situational. Again, there could be maybe some deck types that could use this, but outside of that, don't put this in your deck. There's better fort removal and better heal. So yeah, I'd give this like a 1 out of 5.
Military secret.
Draw 2 and reduce the cost of any spells drawn by this casting to 0. Military Secrets is interesting. I mean, if you run a lot of spells, especially high cost spells, but then again, that's not going to be a very meta deck. Like, so it's an interesting, like, okay, draw 2. If they happen to be high cost spells, they cost 0. But it's costing like 4 to play it. So I feel like if you try to build a deck around this, usually the deck is going to be garbage because you're going to have too many spells and not enough units, or vice versa. But I've seen some people do this in a deck. Maybe a druid deck, or I'm trying to think, but it's one of those, if you love RNG and you want to let RNGs just take the wheel, okay, you should run Military Secrets. But no, I think stay away from this if you're a new player, unless you know what you're doing. So give it a 1 out of 5.
Secrets. Mystic array.
Mystic Array, 4 cost, deal 4 damage randomly split between all enemy units, enemy walls, and enemy stronghold. So this one's interesting. This could potentially, say if you cleared the enemy side, this could do 4 to stronghold, which is quite strong. A spell card doing 4 damage is pretty good for a neutral card. But if there's walls out or enemies even, it's going to split that up. So it's less exciting in that regard. Yeah, I think it's average, 2 out of 5.
Quicksand.
Destroy non-champion, non-flight unit with 3 or less power. Cost 4. I'm not a huge fan of this one. I give it a 1 out of 5.
Transfer.
All right, Uncommon Transference is actually a really good, especially beginner card. It does, is it like fort decks are taking over the meta? Then this will be the card to get in your deck, just one of. But outside that, again, I'd probably say 2 out of 5. But against that meta type deck, it's like almost a 5. So it's hard to rate this card.
Flood. Dragon's warning.
Dragon's Warning. Deal 3 damage to all units in frontline row. Spawn a Scorched Land fort in all unoccupied spaces of that row. Yeah, I've seen this used really well in a Strife deck, but it costs a lot. It's, you know, you got to have all the units, a nice smather of units in a row. Kind of similar to what's that called? Carpet Bombing. But it's not a terrible spell card. It's the purple one, so that's hard to get. But I probably just put it as a 3 out of 5. Because if the stars do align and you pull this off, especially in certain fort destruction decks, this could be really extremely strong. But outside that, I wouldn't put this in a normal deck.
Praise the sky.
So Praise the Sky, I think it's a 6 cost. Deal 4 damage to a unit in the front lines. Units adjacent to the target deal 2 damage. This is good if you're going for like really spell heavy a type of deck for removal. Does cost a lot though. That's the thing I'm not over the moon with. I mean, 6. If a spell card is going to cost 6, it better be, you know, mind blowing. So, yeah, I would say 3 out of 5 average card.
Energy.
Deal 2 damage to all units in a row. For each unit destroyed, you and your opponent gain 1 mana. So this is a good example of very high cost spell, but that actually is quite good. If a lot of times players usually leave low health units in spawn rows, so there's a good chance you can kind of trigger this on like maybe 3 units, maybe 4 if you're lucky. So that's going to refund you 4 mana. So the thing costs 7. So best circumstances only cost you 3 to play this, but most cases you probably won't pull that off. But what's interesting about it is if you're wiping a whole row off, so it says your opponent will gain mana as well, but the fragments from wiping all those units out is probably going to cap them at 10 anyways. So it's not so terrible because it's like if you wipe that many units out, they're already at like probably close to 10 mana. So they're not really gaining that advantage from that 1 mana, but it's more helping you. But again, it's usually you only want to play it. So Burn Temple is really good on survivability decks because you want to be taking damage, and this profits when you take damage. So really good with mana feedback. It's only 1 cost, and if your strategy is trying to get your champion out early, this is a great fort card. You play it, you engage with enemy, you're getting at least 2 tokens there. If your opponent responds and removes it, you still benefit from the 2 tokens. But the thing about forts is the higher the cost the fort is, the more riskier it is to play it, because the moment you play a high cost fort, they could remove it, and then your tempo to your economy is hit pretty bad. So that's one thing. With lower cost forts, there's not such a big risk to play it, and so I'd rate that a 3 out of 5.
Circle of Life.
So Circle of Life, very good in combo decks and particular decks, but what makes it so good in combo decks, they want to go through their deck as quickly as possible to get the right cards to do the combo. This thing costs 1. You play it, you could discard a card that you don't really need or it's not needed. And there you go, you've sort of refunded the 1 cost for the fort. And now you have a cycle to go quicker through your deck. And again, really good in combo decks, but there's a lot of decks that can benefit, such as the Astro Gambit deck I put on YouTube. A lot of decks can benefit from this. This is a really good fort card. It's kind of a 2-edged sword. So new players, a lot of times they're going to deck out too quickly. They're going to discard too many cards, and then they're going to be almost emptying their entire deck and then facing an empty deck penalty, which they're going to die eventually. So you got to be careful with it. But really good in combo decks. So I would give this like a 4 out of 5. It's really strong. And I think when I was playing Dragonfront back in the day, this was definitely a meta type card in most decks with some of the high meta factions, because it's just so versatile. And because the thing what you'll find in Dragonfront is like there might be a card that is like you really need or you don't need, and it's like, okay, this is a good one to discard, but now you're going to draw a card. So it could come in pretty clutch. Also with factions that generate some type of cost, one where you get mana daggers, like a mana dagger, extra mana dagger card, you could discard that. So there's even ways to kind of like, even if you don't want to, you're a player that you don't like to discard any of your cards, well, there's ways to discard the cards you just generate. So it's pretty good. Metaphysical components. Owner gains 1 mana. It's a trap. I don't get this. Like, it's bad. So I'm gonna pay. I'm gonna pay 1, someone lands on it and you gain 1 mana back. Now, this would only be good if there's some kind of synergy when traps get destroyed or whatnot. Something happens positive to whatever your strategy is. Okay. But outside that, this is really bad. So, yeah, 0.5 out of 5.
Nightfall General.
Well, this fort doesn't play a range and catapult traits are ignored. Now, this is really, really strong, like really strong. If you are facing a lot of range or catapult decks out there. Problem is you probably aren't. There's some players that do love range or love catapult, and this can wreck their decks, right? So, but in the general population of playing many Dragonfront games, if you run this and you're like, I would say 1 out of 20, you're probably not facing a whole bunch of catapult or even range some games. But some players love range and catapult, so I would say this is a good wild or a cycle card to put in your deck if you're facing a particular person on the ladder and he's always running like range and catapult. Then put this in your deck and they'll have a bad time against you. But yeah, rate probably 1 out of 5, but not really good.
Scorched Land.
End of turn, deal 1 damage to occupied unit. Not very spectacular. There's some usefulness to it if you're just trying to spam as many forts as possible, but no, this is almost a 0 rated card. 0 out of 5 almost.
Secret Door.
Occupying non-giant units are randomly teleported to an unoccupied fort. I know there must be some way to use this card effectively in some type of weird deck, but I have yet to figure that out. But yeah, that's almost like a 0 out of 5 again. So you're noticing it, and I'm just going through a lot of cards right now. I don't know, guys, if we're going to get through the entire card list of Dragonfront because there's a lot of cards, but I'm trying my best. Hopefully to get through the neutrals, and then we'll probably do part 2.
Dynamic Cluster.
So Dynamic Cluster, when they play units in that spawn row, you're going to draw a card. So that's a good fort, 3 out of 5. Again, I want to stress with Dragonfront, it really emphasizes deck building. What I mean by that is like you got to have a reason for putting certain cards in your deck, but there are key things. Like I said, you need to gain mana, you need to draw cards. Those 2 main things are going to make a good deck in this game. So like there's many ways to draw cards. That's one example. With a fort, you can draw cards, but Ether Stream tap. Each time an enemy unit generates mana in the lane, gain 1 mana. So I like this fort. But I do have my negatives with it. You play against a good player, they're just going to be like, nope, I'm not going to play a unit in that lane with this fort. Therefore, you're not going to generate any mana. But I mean, at some point, then it's like, what? They're down to 3 spawn lanes only. So eventually they're going to want to fill the 4th lane out, but it costs does this cost 1 or 2? I didn't check. So I mean, it's not terrible. Here's the thing. When I used to play Dragonfront back in the day, the most popular decks, like as a very strong faction, and I think as more players get in the game, a lot of them are going to main Essence, or at least play with Essence a lot. And this is a great fort to shut down Essence down because Essence uses a lot of spells for removal and a lot of the combo decks even. So this can like, you put it down, and if they don't have a fort removal for this, they're in trouble because they like to use spells to remove a lot of stuff. So I definitely think this is a sleeper fort. I don't see many people run it. but I can see its purposes. So I'd probably rate this a 3.5 out of 5. Very good, kind of unique fort. Not to be put on every deck, but like I said, if the meta gets heavily into spell removal, this could be kind of clutch for certain units, especially units with range, because a lot of times players will remove your range units with spells a lot of times.
Totem. Jungle trap.
Jungle Trap, standard trap. Unit takes 2 damage, is stunned, then destroys fort. I think it's 2 costs. No, not a huge fan of it. It does do stun, but I'll give you an example. Thorns has, I think it's a 1 cost, and it's a permanent fort that stuns. So you can see how that's so much better, but 1 out of 5 for this card. 2 cost Lava Vent. Very good fort, especially the forts that are survivor forts. So you can do this, and it's also good in aggression decks too, because a lot of times you're removing things that they're trying to play or block. And I've seen this work pretty well in some very aggressive decks. Yeah, so I'd rate this 3 out of 5. It's a good fort. Definitely don't sleep on it. This is a bad fort. This is definitely almost, I would say probably a 0. If this fort is occupied by an ally unit, enemy units cannot attack if they moved into this row. So basically what it does is normally when a unit moves in to another unit, it's going to attack. This just says, nope, you don't attack, but you move. But what does that change? Then it's your turn, and that unit's in your way. You have to deal with it. So you're now attacking it. So I really don't understand this fort. Like, I don't understand the benefit of it, really. I mean, perhaps it gives you a chance to play a spell card to remove that unit that moved next to your unit. But do you really want to play a fort like that? I don't know. I feel like there's way better forts. So yeah, 0 out of 5. Mystic Mind, 2 costs, trap, push and deal 2 damage to this unit and destroys fort. I used this in my Jester deck. I liked it, but I think this one's a little bit better. But again, very niche type fort. But I did use it in one of my particular decks I built. But outside that, don't put this in your deck. So yeah, I'd give this like a 2 or a 1 out of 5. But it's an interesting trap. Like I said, it could be used in certain traps. Here's a wall, but this wall is decent. At least you draw a card. So, but walls are tricky. So why walls are not bad per se, but it's like people don't know how to use walls. That's the problem. There's certain strategies you can, like, for instance, say you use your catapult. Most catapults have a mechanism where they're stunned after they are activated. So you're kind of like vulnerable for like 2 turns. Well, this is where say you could play a wall after you activate your catapult, and now you have a little bit of protection there, right? And then say you play Terra Whale on top of this, destroys it, you draw a card, your catapult now can shoot over Terra Whale. So like there's like kind of crazy things you could do, but I don't mind this wall. 2 costs, it draws you a card. But again, you're generally not putting walls in your deck. I rather put in the engineer unit to give me a random wall. Sacrifice Fold is an amazing fort for a specific type of deck, which there's decks that want to take damage like Eclipse, and there's ways for you to do this indirect damage, Strife, and so this can pop off quite a bit. And so what you can wind up doing is near the mid to late game, you can just kind of win by doing like indirect damage, which is hard for your opponent to stop. Now, the counter to this would be healing. So again, with Dragonfront, say this becomes the meta, right? Then you're going to see a range unit, right? So you have a lot of range. You put this in your range row. So say you do 3 damage to something, and then at the then it's going to finish off, say, a Grizzly Mac, 2 more damage, right? So it's yeah, I see the benefits of this. 3.5 out of 5. It's a pretty good fort. For each other ally in this lane, ally units in this lane gain +1 power. Now, I like this fort with certain decks like Grim Angel, the Necromancer, Stygian Necromancer dude. So if you can spawn a whole bunch of stuff or swarm decks, this is a really good fort because it makes those 1/1s do a lot more damage. So this is a good fort. So 4 out of 5. So trap Hush. When Hush is applied to a unit on the space, there's 50 chances 4 will be destroyed. Yeah. Ugh. It's okay. So Hush is very, very, very powerful. But the main problem, and I'll say it again with traps, is so say your opponent plays something crazy that has a crazy ability. You play this in Destruction Spire. Destroy the next non-champion enemy unit deployed in this lane, and then destroy this fort. So I'm not in love with this, but it's definitely more stronger if your opponent has less cards in their hand. Because what happens, generally speaking, if you play this with your opponent having lots of cards in their hand, they're going to drop like a 1-cost unit. This blows up, and then they'll play a better, higher cost unit, and they kind of get around this, right? And then you lose the cost that you played this for. But if you play this when your opponent has less cards, they might only have a high cost, 6-cost unit, 7-cost unit, and they have, this is stopping them from playing that unit. And say that lane, they have to play something, right? They have to block it or whatnot. So I can see where this card could be useful, but I've seen it countered pretty hard though. If you're not paying, like if you play it too early when your opponent has lots of options, it's pretty easy just to counter this. But it's not a bad fort. 3 out of 5. So 3-cost Dwarven Cannon. 1 random enemy unit in this lane is dealt 1 damage. Now, where this gets really countered hard is survivor units. They love to see Dwarven Cannon. So that's the one negative, but I found a home for it in my Time and Space deck. I like it in that deck because I can like put my Poppy Fields stun fort with this behind it with 2 pins and needles somewhere on the board. And I'm doing 6 damage. Basically, if you play, my opponent plays like a generic unit. So it basically makes my Time and Space like immortal, basically, if I keep it in the spawn row. But yeah, it can help you deal with decks that like to play low-cost health units. Silence is a good example. Or it just makes the enemy not want to put anything in that lane. So I say 3 out of 5. It's, again, it's an interesting fort card. End of turn is always the best. Enemy units at full health are destroyed. Destroy this fort. Don't play this against Essence because they just mana dagger one of their units and then they walk on it. It's destroyed. Nothing happens. Yeah, it's Fear Garden's interesting, but like I said, there's that easy counter. Like there's many ways to try to ping one of your own units sometimes, and this is where this kind of falls apart. And if that happens, that's your worst nightmare. But I wouldn't say it's a terrible card. But again, the opponent could wait for a removal card and then move out his unit. So yeah, 2 out of 5.
Glossy
This is a really good card. If your deck is kind of like a grind, slow deck that just wants to grind out your opponent, very slow game, this can be an amazing card because you could get some really good traps. You get a really good fort. If you don't get what you like, you discard it, you gain 1 mana from it. So this acts as like a semi mana generator fort almost, but with the benefit of traps and forts RNG. So I'd say this is like a 4 out of 5 if you like to run forts. This is one that definitely is not a bad idea. Where you can get, if you play it and your opponent just removes it, that's where this unit, deal 2 damage to the unit and destroy this fort. If this kills a unit, deploy a 1/1 animate Stygian in the space. Interesting trap, kind of costs a lot. There's a unit, I think, a Tempest something that it creates these, which I think is a better variant of, I always like things that, like the engineer or something that, like when you play it, it does something and then it gives you like one of these things free. So, but yeah, I'd give this, by putting in your deck, it's eating up a valuable slot. This is 1 out of 5.
poison field.
Enemy units are poison. Now, it's a trap that does not go away though. So again, this is again for poison specific decks, namely in Silence, they have access to a fort that increases damage of poison. So this is where the only time I think it would be realistically played in Silence. So outside of Silence, definitely don't want to run this. Would be 1 out of 5. In a poison Silence deck, it could be usable, but outside that, no. So Reference Library is one of my favorite forts. So this could be great in combo decks. I run this in my Anima deck, 2 of them. And either in decks that just run lots of spells, like a Druid deck or something. Very, very good fort. If you're playing against this, you want to remove this because this thing will... It scales very well, right? Because if you have a lot of mana, you can then just do a lot of spells. And again, combo decks love this fort. So I give this like probably a 5 out of 5, if I'm being honest. 5 out of 5. Because it's not only good in combo decks, it's good in just lots of decks that just run lots of spells. So Shadow Construction is very interesting. Heal your stronghold for 1. You can kind of do a deck that, again, is one of those grind decks that you just want to outgrind your opponent. And so you run this just to keep you always healthy. And so it's a pretty good fort, actually, especially if you're against aggression decks. So I give it like a 3, maybe a 3.5 out of 5. It's a really good heal fort deck. Probably one of the best heal fort deck. Sniper Nest, end of turn, if occupied by an ally unit, deal enemy stronghold 1 damage. So again, this is good with Strife. Good in certain deck types that are trying to do indirect damage to stronghold. But outside that, probably pass on it. But I give it a 3 out of 5 because it's really good in those particular decks. This one, I'd give it 4 out of 4. 4 out of 5. Stability Void does a couple things. It's going to... so if you play it and then you could play a whole bunch of forts in your hands. So, and what's the beauty of this is, so say you play a whole bunch of high cost forts after this. Even if your opponent removes the forts you played, you were refunded by this. So this is the benefit of Stability Void, is it allows you to not be punished as badly for playing a bunch of high cost forts. So basically you just want to get this on the field on the turn you play it, and then instantly play all your high cost forts. And that way you're not punished if your opponent removes them or has a lot of anti-fort removal. So it's like a safe way of also if you're playing an archetype of just spamming a whole bunch of forts, and then there's a fort deck that uses the Towers of Reprisal, I think, and when a fort is destroyed, you do damage to a stronghold. So yeah, that's also, and there's a real crazy combo with the Strife Champion that it's the dragon that removes forts. This thing will combo with that champion. So yeah, this is definitely a 4 out of 5. But again, it's when you're playing a lot of forts and expensive forts, ideally.
Tower of Reprisal.
So Tower of Reprisal, I just talked about it. So at surface, you're like, oh, it only does 1 damage if you destroy a fort. But here's the thing: you put 2 of them down, and say you have the whole player out of 5. So 4 costers, bolt a trap, deal 2 damage to unit and destroy this fort. Death, deal 2 damage to enemy stronghold. I like the death effect. Anything that does like damage to stronghold can be very effective. Now, death meaning it has to trigger, not, I don't believe it counts if you just destroy the fort. I think death means it has to kind of go through the motion of something landed on it. Okay. So it doesn't trigger, I believe, when you just destroy the fort. But yeah, I see this could work in certain situations. But yeah, I give it a 3 out of 5, or maybe a 2 out of 5. But
Brilliant Lighthouse.
so Lighthouse, while occupied by an ally unit, reveal all enemy units with stealth. Here's the thing, though: stealth isn't really a game changer in my point of view. Even the best silence players I've seen play, I never felt stealth was like, oh darn, I lost because of stealth. In fact, sometimes stealth can get in the way because, like, when you play a stealth unit, you're not generating mana, but there is a fort that to allow you to generate stealth, but then there's an option that's better than the stealth. I don't know, it's confusing, but yeah, I mean, I'm not saying like stealth is terrible, but if I were to play Lighthouse, so I could see stealth units, I mean, one that goes in enemy territory and draws a card. There's a couple of the roster where you do have to guess what sort of stealth unit they played. The 3 cost has the sniper, and the 3/3 melee reveal mana guy. But that's where stealth could have been way better if they gave silence more stealth units that were in the same cost ratio. So where, you don't know what type of unit they played, but currently there's not enough stealth units. So a lot of times you know exactly what unit they played. So that's where it's like, is stealth helping the silence player, or is it helping the enemy player? Because now I know what you played based on the mana you used. But yeah, going back to Brilliant Lighthouse, occupying non-giant ally units have shift. So basically, non-giant ally units can shift. Grizzly Mac can take advantage of this. High power units could take advantage of this. So this is a really good fort. It costs a lot. That's where the risk is, right? But again, if you can get this down and it's not removed, this is really good. So this is probably like a 4 out of 5 as far as the fort goes. But my biggest comment was the stealth thing. I would never play it, just so I can see stealth units, but the shift is really well worth it. Feedback Murmur is 5 out of 5 for drain decks, or decks that want to prevent your opponent from playing the game, basically. But outside that, it's very specific type of deck. Outside this deck, it's like 1 out of 5. Because you can get punished so badly. Like, it costs 4, Your opponent removes it with a cheap unit or spell, and your tempo is really bad. But occupying non-champion units are returned to their owner's hand. Yeah, I played this in my mill deck that I made. Outside that, nah, I wouldn't run it. It's interesting for it, but costs a lot. But yeah, it is pretty powerful for what it does. Not a terrible for it, but 2 out of 3, I'd say. 2 out of 5, I meant. Deal 6 damage to the unit and destroys fort. Now, this trap, I believe, is the highest raw damage for a trap. So this basically will kill most land stuff in the game. Flyers can fly over it, though. But it costs quite a bit. Is this how much 4 we put in my deck? Because it's not bad. I like using the fort card that gives you random walls or forts, or the engineer. Besides, like putting an actual wall in my deck.
Extinction wall.
This wall is a big boy. It has a lot of health. Deal 1 damage to all units in the lane. End of turn, deal 1 damage to this fort. Can work in survivability decks. So it's like 3 out of 5, I guess, but it's a wall. That's the problem. All right, so going into neutral units, we're gonna stop at the end of neutral units because yeah, this is just there's a lot of cards to cover. I'll find out if people enjoyed this live stream with the Dragonfront community. So if this does well, we can continue and talk about champions and the other factions. But let's cover the neutral units. Wayward Ghouls, excellent 0 cost aggression type unit, or early mana unit. The fact that you could play this doesn't cost any mana at the start of the game. Don't really want to draw this in the late game though. Has kind of a negative, maybe a positive, depending on what faction you're playing. Deal 1 damage to your owner's stronghold when it dies. Lunatic can really punish you for playing this. You need to be able to draw that does 2 random damage. So this will survive a lunatic drop. It does deal 1 damage back to one of your allies. Keep that in mind. But if you run even some survivability cards like Shade Thaumaturge, this could be a bonus. So yeah, I like that. I would say this is 3.5 out of 5 for a 1-drop unit. Deathblow, but 1 power. Not liking it. This is a 1 out of 5. Now this is a hollow unit. There is a hollow archetype deck to make that powers hollow type units. So this is the only time you really want to play this particular unit. If you're running like a hollow deck, outside that, it's pretty bad. I'd say 1 out of 5. But the thing is, there's not, okay. Manimal is actually really good. Phenomenal in Thorns faction. Very good card in a Thorns faction. But yeah, the weakness to this card is it could become like very high health, and then your opponent could play like something that benefits from like surviving combat with, like Shade Thaumaturge, or he might use that to his advantage where you have a lane that only does 1 power, or but in certain decks, this card's really good. Really solid 1-drop. It is countered by Lunatic, but a lot of cards are countered by Lunatic. But it's only 1 cost drop. It's really good. I'd say this is maybe 3.5 out of 5. Yeah, it's good. Union, I don't know. At 2 out of 5. I think there's okay. This is good. But this is more of a counter unit because you want to play this against a champion, against a Grizzly Mac, against, now it's the The weakness is it's removed. It's only 1 health. But if your opponent doesn't have a removal spell, this is awesome. Like, you could shut down a champion, you could shut down a very powerful high power unit, and it only costs you 1 mana to play this, and you get the mana back from it dying. So I would say this is like, the problem is you don't want to play that in the early game. You want to hold on to the Necromancer girl. New players will play this in the early game. I mean, sometimes you have to, but very good to hold on to it if you play it more smartly that way. It's like a 4 out of 5 card. But yeah, death, stun the unit 1 space in front of this unit. Yeah, 1 out of 5. I don't know. I'm not over the moon with that. So this unit is not bad, but it's also drawing your opponent a card. And I never like to give my opponent an advantage. But like I did a mill deck. This is kind of one of the best cards in my mill deck, basically. But yeah, you get a bad matchup with it. I don't like this card. 1 out of 5. I just don't like it. This can prevent damage, and then it kind of dies, but it has to be in your spawn row. 2-coster though. Yeah, I guess 2 out of 5. But oh no, it's a 1-coster. Okay, sorry, I misspoke. Okay, so maybe it's 3 out of 5 then. I thought it was a 2-coster. This one's like a 4 out of 5 because if you like to run repurpose, this is a great one to repurpose once it's spawned its jelly. And it's good defensively. So any card that does a respawn is great defense because it's just your opponent might have to play 2 removal spells to get rid of it. So there's a lot of ways to slow down the game or just protect yourself. The respawn could be usually the best method because a lot of times your opponent has like a removal for whatever unit, where this is like going to be a lot harder for them to do. So yeah, this is 4 out of 5. So getting into 2 drops now. The frog dudes, I like them. I think they're 3 out of 5, solid unit. They draw you a card when they die. Very good for aggro decks or decks that want to cycle through their deck quickly. So Armed Lunatic, this is literally the S tier of 2 drops. This card is probably one of the hot cards that gets debated between the veteran players, whether this card needs to be nerfed or if it's too good. There's so much flexibility, early game unit denial, survivability. If you have survivor cards, you can ping yourself on it. Someone's running like Tempest Artillery. You could play this and get lucky and just kill the Tempest Artillery. Battlefield Surveyors are annoying, which are very prevalent in this game. Very strong counter to them. So again, this is a 5 out of 5. 5 out of 5 unit. Assault Bolters, I don't like. 1 out of 5. It just has range and it's a 2-cost, 1 power unit. All right, this would be a 5 out of 5 card. Battlefield Surveyors, one of the best unit pound for pound for mana generation. You can't go wrong putting this in any deck. And the fact this is an uncommon deck, uncommon card, so everybody that I guess buys Dragonfront, you'll get this card unlocked. This should pretty much go into most decks, but not every deck. Hello, Ben. Hey, man. Cool to see more of Dragonfront content. Just seeing this now and can't watch, but we'll definitely go back and watch this. Yeah, it's kind of a long one. I'm systematically, painfully going through every card in the game that's been released, and I'm trying to give my rating and take on each card. I'm definitely not going to finish the whole roster. Aggro Aggression Dragonfront decks. This is an amazing card because if you look at the ability, it's going to do +3 more power to a giant. When in combat against Stronghold or a giant, it does more damage. So I wouldn't really pay attention to a giant. So the thing about giants is they're not as common in most decks, but again, I wouldn't say they're like unicorns or anything like that, but I like the +3 power to Stronghold because if I'm playing a super aggro deck, this is money right here. This is definitely scary. This is something your opponent has to deal with because it's just too much damage, right? So that would be like probably for aggro type card, that's probably a 3.5 out of 5. But outside a non-aggro deck, this is probably lower, probably like a 1 or a 2. Now, I like this card a lot. I gotta scrap this card because it's so good. It's only it's a common, so I can afford it. So if you saw my earlier part of this video, I did talk about walls a lot and how I didn't say walls were terrible, but like they kind of, you have 30 cards to put in your deck, and do you really want to put a wall in your deck? Like, you know, this is the benefit is you can play this guy, which is a unit, which can act as a chump blocker. It could generate you mana right in the early game. It's a 2 cost. But the benefit is you get a wall from it. So you get that. So most decks need early drops, right? You need 1 cost and 2 cost units because you need to get that mana flowing in your spawn row. And this is a great card. It survives a lunatic attack because it has 3 health. More importantly, it gives you a random wall. Now, here's the thing. Even if you get a really bad wall, you can just discard it and you gain a mana. So now this guy acts as a pseudo ramp mana card, right? Because you can just discard the wall you get if you don't like it. But the nice part is you might get a wall that is really good in the matchup you're in. Like that wall could be like a game changer into a strategy your opponent tries to play. So I know if you watched my stream a bit, you might get the notion like I don't like walls. I like walls. I just don't like to, you know, make my deck. When I build decks, it's very competitive for the 30 cards. JJE says, Happy New Year, Describe. Please keep arms and legs inside the ride at all times. What does that mean? Okay, so anyways, I like this card a lot, and I don't even have him unlocked yet, but I would rate this card. I want to rate it a 5 out of 5 because I personally love this card, but there is a lot of competition for the early drops, so maybe a 4 out of 5, but definitely this is a solid unit card. It works in so many decks, and I think the benefit of this card is this has some mad potential. Why I like this card is in those fort specific decks, this thing can get huge and your opponent has to deal with it. The thing is, though, there's many ways to deal with it in the early game. Your opponent will have lots of a big hand size, so it sort of can kind of get dealt with. But if you're able to baby it a bit, this is a very scary thing. 3 out of 5. I think it's good in certain decks. Obviously not good in a non-fort deck, but so 2 costs. Feral Arachnic. Now this is a very interesting card. It has Rush. Now Rush is very, very strong in certain ways. Respawn, that's what makes it even more interesting. So what's nice about this when you think about it, right? It has 1 mana fragment. So you're paying 2. You're gonna get that mana fragment back, but more importantly, it has rush. So it's almost like a pseudo spell, basically, because you're gonna usually play it when the opponent's coming at you. So you get that instant kind of like 1 damage, and then you could do another damage. So it's almost like a 2 damage spell card, but that can be also used in generating you mana. This is a really good card, actually, and there's a lot of decks that can take advantage of the respawn. There's some decks that you like. Eclipse has a spell that can give you +1 buff every time something dies. But yeah, I like this card a lot. I think this is like a 4 out of 5. It's a very strong card, and it's common too, so it's easy to scrap. While any champion is in play, this unit has breach and +2/+2. So I think this is a great unit if you're going for an early champion rush type of deal, like especially an aggro rush champion. Because like you can, he becomes, what does he become again? What's his power level? He becomes a 3/3 with breach. So very aggressive. But again, you don't want to play him in the early game. You want to play him. So that's similar to the Necromancer Covenus or whatever, or not the Covenus. The one that's a 1/1 that if does damage, your power goes to 1. So similar to this type of unit, you don't really want to play them early game. You want to play them when your champion or a champion comes out. But I would probably say 2 out of 5. But so this one, I see a lot of players play. It's pretty good. It basically will do 4 damage if it dies, because it has death blow, and that's killing a lot of units in the game, and for only 2 costs, and you get the mana fragment back. So that's a unit. Now this one is a really interesting card. The thing though, most players are going to delete this because they're scared of something crazy coming out. Basically, if it gets to the enemy territory and dies, and you have a giant in your hand, that giant would then take its place. So at no cost. Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. But the problem is most players will hit the panic button and kill that right away, or make sure they put a strong unit in that lane and stop it from getting to their lane. The way you can cheat this is if you sprint it, push it. So if you kind of run those shenanigans, you can kind of get lucky, and then a big giant comes out and you might just win the game right there. So this is a high, it's a risk reward type card. If you can't really pull it off, it's pretty blasé. But if you can pull it off, this is really strong. So it's like a 4 out of 5 to a 2, basically, depending on how you kind of go about trying to get this to work. But yeah, it's pretty good.
Slithering Blister.
Deal 1 damage to the enemy stronghold, death. This is good in decks that are trying to do a lot of indirect damage to stronghold. Yeah, this is an auto include for those decks. Outside this deck, I wouldn't run it. But again, it's not bad. It's 3 out of 5 average card.
Sonic Feeder.
Probably one of the better cheap blight cards in the neutral field. Again, for blight or drain decks, this is an auto include. It's really good. Thing is, you get it to your opponent's front line. It's doing 2 damage to the stronghold. So they don't want to be taking 2 damage every single round, because that's a lot of damage. They're eventually going to have to deal with it. So that's all I gotta say about that. But the blight is very strong in Dragonfront. Very strong thing to have. Some players think maybe it's too strong blight. But it's gonna be maybe a 4 out of 5. But again, for strategies that are not focused on blight or drain, it's kind of not a great card. There's better cards, but if you're focused on that archetype, this is a really powerful card.
Spiders of Scythe.
Gives you stun. Yeah, it's not bad. The lunatic doesn't delete it. So 3 out of 5, not a bad unit.
Spined Predator.
I think this is a sleeper. This can work on champions, but here's the problem: Spine Predator. Ideally, you want to play it as a counter unit, not so much to play in an open lane because your opponent will play around it, but it does have some very good utility late game if you play it late game. So I would rate this quite high because Hush shuts down a lot of certain strategies. So this could be, but again, this is more an advanced card that you know what you're doing in Dragonfront. So it could be 4 out of 5, maybe a 3 or 2 if you don't know what you're doing. Lava, what was it called? Lava something. But yeah, outside that, there's some better 3-drops, but I would say 3 out of 5. But again, the hard part to rate this is if you build towards these cards, they become better. And that's why I'm always kind of contradicting myself when I'm talking about certain cards, but it's hard to give like a general rating, so that's why I'm trying to rate. Stun, unit damaged by this unit, or poison. Again, it's a poison type decks. That's about it. So again, 2 out of 5 probably.
Desert Cavalry.
Their stats are pretty good. 3 out of 5. Cause that's a 4/3. That's pretty good. Again, this is a hollow type card, so meaning you're playing this basically in a hollow deck with thorns, basically. Yeah. So again, 2 out of 5. But in that type of archetype, it goes up to 3 or 4 out of 5. But again, but this one's a little bit better. It has Rush. Grant all ally units with Rush. Again, that could be champion too. So, but again, it's specifically for a certain archetype. So it's hard to rate these cards when these are rated for specific archetypes. It's not really fair to rate them for the other factions because they're not really usable per se. This one's interesting. This one is like if this unit enters enemy territory, it's destroyed. So this is totally pacifist type unit. So you have to know what you're doing, but it's really good for those like Prince Yates decks or where you're trying to get, it's a grindy type deck. So yeah, 3 out of 5.
Hysterical Infected.
If this unit is killed by combat, place a copy of opposing non-champion enemy unit in your hand. Yeah, this is interesting. It's I've done it in some decks, average 3 out of 5. But
Memoriam Bug.
this unit is killed by combat, shuffle into your deck. This is a sleeper for me because there's some decks that are trying to grind you out and just, deck you out. And this is a counter to those decks because you can keep playing it and then, get it back, play it. Its weakness, yeah, if it gets taken out by outside of combat, it doesn't get put in your deck. So there is a way to kind of remove it. But if you get near the end game and your opponent has limited cards, chances are they might not have the removal for it. So, yeah, you would want to play that card in the very late game too. This guy's not bad. 3 out of 5. Because he has Union. If either champion has been destroyed, this unit gains +3 power. She comes what, a 6/3? Oh wow. Again, certain decks. It's not a bad card. 3 out of 5.
Surge Assassins.
2 out of 5. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of that card.
TNT Packed Goblin.
This one's interesting. This has 6 with sprint, but then it blows up and is destroyed. The weakness obviously is the 1 health. 4 cost. Execute game like +2. I think I go back to it. 3 out of 5. Flight, sprint. This is nice for aggro decks. This is probably 3 out of 5. It's solid. Execute, gain 2 mana, very good against drain decks. This is probably a 4 out of 5. Because the meta was all about drain decks at one point. I go back to this for a sec. Yeah, Dire Bear is Dire Bear. This guy has good vanilla stats. 4 out of 5. 5 health is hard. Like only Grizzly Mac and a few other units can kind of one-shot him. So he's really good for uncommon. So I'd say 3.5 out of 5. He's solid. Sprint immune to damage to 4. It's very niche. That's a 2 out of 5. But the sprint is nice. This is very good for also against drain decks. Whenever this unit activates, gain 1 mana. Yeah, that's a good 3.5 out of 5. This guy's a 4 out of 5 just because card draw is so important in this game for the most part. Mana and card draw, those are the lifeblood of this game. But the fact that he's 4 power, 4 health, that's just great stats overall. And then the fact that he draws 1 if he survives is really good. So yeah, he's 4 out of 5. For each point of damage received, this unit gains +1 power. He's interesting. You can do some shenanigans with him in certain decks. Yeah, I don't mind. But I said 3 out of 5 because there's certain decks that can kind of utilize him the best. This could be very strong. 3.5 out of 5. But anything that can do indirect damage, you can build a strategy around it, and it's very hard for your opponent to deal with. Very solid range unit. This is a good 3.5 out of 5. This one's going to be 4 out of 5. Now, there is a strong counter to it, which is the 1 health. You have Snipe, a 0-cost spell that people can tap into. If you're playing Essence, you got Mana Dagger that can deal with it. Lunatic that gets lucky sometimes. But if you don't have an answer, this can shut you down and you can lose your opponent quite quickly. But if you run Snipes, this goes down in value, you know? So, but this is very solid. In fact, you know, it's a great range with 5. What more could you want? So yeah, 4 out of 5. Really good card. If this unit is destroyed in frontline space with no fort present, respawn Plague Mine. Yeah, so I like this one more than just, I talked about just the trap. 3 out of 5. It's not bad. It's cool if you like traps. 4 out of 5. This one, or it could be 5 out of 5. I mean, this, okay, so here's the thing. It has flight. It does 4 attack power. It has blight on top of it. So huge tempo swing. If your opponent tries to defend with your unit, it's going to lose the mana fragments. So you're probably going to kill killer, basically. If he goes toe-to-toe with any champion in the game, the champion's going to have lights out for them. 3 out of 5. Outside of battling champions, to me, it's just a champion killer, basically. Deploy a mercenary in a random space. I like this guy, actually. 4 out of 5. He's pretty strong. Good aggro. I would say probably 4 out of 5. The 1 damage. Now, the caveat, the drawback is there's a 50% chance he won't do his spawn a random row. But if he does, he procs to deal 1 damage to all enemy units in enemy territory, which is really nice.
Steamwing Bomber.
That's a hollow type card. I don't think I even want to comment on that. I already did. Terra Will. I do like this one. This could be used on your own forts, your opponent's forts. Say you play something expensive and you don't need it anymore. You Terra Will it. It's ready to hit next turn. I like this card a lot, but usually only want one of them, and if you run a high cost fort in your deck is advisable. This one's probably a 4 out of 5 for me. I really like Terra Will a lot. I think it's a great card. Union, I don't think I've ever played this guy. 2 out of 5. It's a giant with Union. It's weird. This is a good card. This is a 4 out of 5 card. Armor, 3 attack, but it has sprint, flight. Nasty for you to deal with. Yeah, that's good. Griffin, another good card. This is 4 out of 5. For some people, it could be 5 out of 5. Very strong card. You have to deal with it. Has flight. It's gonna end the game real quick if you don't have an answer for it. And yeah, so it's Grizzly Mac, the tried and true. This is probably the draw king. Everyone loves to run Grizzly Mac, and he's 4 out of 5. He's a great card. You could sigil him, get a bunch of tokens. You can shift him, lighthouse him, push him, and he loves to be moved around basically. Yeah, maybe 5 out of 5 really. If I think about it, it's a really good card. Add 1/1 slime to your hand. Yeah, this is a really. I like this card actually a lot in certain decks, but I put this at a 4 out of 5. But it's more my preference really. It's
Necrotic Abomination.
2 out of 5. Average giant. This one's 4 out of 5 because it has sprint, and it could be scary. It can end the game real quick. Good in combo deck. This is good fort removal card. I would say 4 out of 5. Solid. 3 out of 5. High cost survivor card that gains you tokens. 4 out of 5. 4.5 out of 5, I think. This thing deal 1 damage to all other units, but you can do a lot of cool synergies with this. I think it's great. It has flight. It's quite powerful. I like it. This one's probably 4 out of 5. Very strong flight card with tons of health. Good defense. Even can do good damage. This one's probably 4 out of 5. If it gets your opponent's front line, it's usually game over. So if you run like a press forward